Hi there. I'm Neva Keeley, and I've been married to my high school sweetheart since 1995. And when I did that, I immediately jumped into the role as a military wife at the ripe old age of 19. Through those years, we had 7 kids in 7 years, including twins and triplets who are all grown up now. And why I'm starting this podcast is I hope to empower women to embrace their divine calling of being a homemaker as the profession that it is. So I hope to be here for accountability, for guidance, for encouragement, because in general, our Western culture thinks homemakers are the lowest you can go. We think that being busy, working outside the home and shuttling kids to and from school and sports is what being a good mom is nowadays, while all mentally comparing ourselves to others that seem to have it all together and look like they have the perfect life. And I'm here to tell you they don't have the perfect life because they aren't living at all. They're just trying to keep up with what our society says is what we're supposed to do. And I did the same thing. So, growing up in a divorced family, I traveled from South Georgia, which is where I grew up with my mom. And I would fly to Texas every summer and some holidays to go visit my dad. And all I wanted growing up was peace. I was the only child between my parents. I was too young to even remember them being married, much less divorced. And that's when I grew up thinking I didn't want the unsettled feeling. I didn't want to think I could only have one parent at a time. And every time I would leave one, I would cry, just like cry, because I ended up being on a plane and flying from Jacksonville, Florida over to Dallas, Fort Worth. And I would cry leaving my mom and then be so excited when I saw my dad. And then I would cry leaving my dad and be so excited seeing my mom. So I had this yo yo of a family. So growing up, I knew I did not want that. I wanted different. As a matter of fact, I even prioritized what I was looking for a husband mentally. I never wrote it out, but I had it in my mind. And I was only around 5 when I started thinking of what did I want? I knew I didn't want this, and my parents couldn't change whatever it was that was happening, even if I begged. But what did I want different than what I had growing up? And so one thing I could control is who? Like, who did I want to spend the rest of my life with? Because I didn't want to not spend the rest of my life with someone. I wanted a best friend. I went down the list and I mentally had a checklist, and I would think about it every so often as I was going to bed. I would think, this is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. And it wasn't a huge list, but it was a list. And if anything else, I actually started praying for my future husband very young. Faith had a lot to do with my growing up, and it was more intuition than it was family dynamics. And I'll have another story for that later. But I would pray for my husband before I was even 10. I would just pray. I would pray for his family. I would pray for him. I would pray for us. Now, I wasn't consumed by trying to find Mr. Right. It was just something I knew deep down I wanted different than what I had. And that was not a bad thing. That was actually a good thing. And looking back on it, that's what I got. So I just kept praying from a very young age, and happened to be that I did meet that list of checkoffs. It wasn't huge, but he met them all, and we are still together. So, one thing I learned also growing up was that money was scarce. So, growing up in South Georgia, and I would say it was the sticks, buddy, we were in the country. We lived on 1 acre in this little bitty brick house, and we were surrounded by farms. We had dust croppers. They would come down and they would spray the surrounding farms. And my playing was going outside all the time. My TV time was scheduled. We didn't have TV all the time. It ended per day, but I would go outside and play, and that was like my leisure. And one thing I learned to do is stay quiet because I didn't want to make things worse for either of my parents. Both of my parents remarried very fast, which gave me siblings when I had none. So I had steps that I had a half, and that was its own dynamic. But in general, it was me and my mom in South Georgia in the sticks. And it was a good place. I appreciate it now, but I didn't want to make things worse. So I learned how to be quiet and to be a peacemaker, which most women learn how to be. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We do make it out to be one sometimes, but I learned how to be a good listener. I learned how to feel the room. I learned how to connect with my gut. I learned how to go with my intuition. I learned how to pray a lot at a very young age. That was like my connection is was my faith. So that was one thing growing up that I learned is money was scarce. And when money was scarce, sometimes you didn't know what you were going to eat. Like I would go in the pantry and there would be nothing. Now, I wasn't the cook. My mom was a great cook. She could cook anything you wanted. So I never had to worry about, a mom that didn't know how to feed. We just didn't have the food to cook. So one day I opened the front door and there was a paper bag on the porch. And there were a couple of stray dogs and they had some aluminum foil or something scattered in the front yard. And so they had made it to the paper bag before I did. But I just felt this overwhelming excitement and a grocery bag of food. Someone brought us food. Like they drove to the sticks and put food on our porch. And it was like the best Christmas gift ever. So I was super excited about that. So things like that growing up, not all the time. We had phases. It's like more, there was a little bit of money to use or spend, and then other times it was not. It wasn't like I'm saying I grew up in, a dirt floor and never had anything. That wasn't the case. It was just more phases. It was more of a not really a roller coaster, but more of just different times had different struggles. And money was always one. And so in between a broken family and broke for money, I didn't want either of those. And so growing up in the 70s and 80s and 90s, I learned from the general public and society and how our Western culture was that the only way I could not have that for myself was if I got a good job. And that would mean success. That would mean I wouldn't have to worry. That would mean I would have the picture perfect life. That would mean I didn't have to not just worry about money, but worry about anything for my family or, if only I worked hard enough, hard enough, because I didn't work super hard on these grades now. If I worked hard enough to get a good job, then I didn't have to worry anymore. So, with that said, I was married right after high school, jumped into the military wife. Then, after my husband's done with active duty, we go back home and we finish up college. Now, one thing that was interesting was he's always been way faster at academics than me. And I think it took me 7 years from high school to graduating college to get my bachelor's degree. Now, it took me 7 years because I was having babies and changing majors, because over time, what I wanted was different. And at first in my academic college time frame, I wanted to be a teacher. And I was like, okay, this will be stable. My kids will go to school. I'll have the summers. We'll have all the holidays. It's just going to be great. So then I was a bit of a band nerd going through middle and high school. And I was thinking, I'll teach music. So then that didn't last very long in my head, but it was a change of major. And then I was like, no, 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 go back to teaching. So go back to teaching. And then it was like, you know what? I really enjoy science. And so I ended up being a biology major, and I stuck with that one until maybe a semester left. One semester left for my biology degree, or at least equivalent in classes. And I didn't do it. I was like, nope. Because we had this poster in college that was what you can do with a biology degree. And it was like this person flipping hamburgers. And I was thinking, you know what? I'm having number 2 and 3, because I was having twins at the time. We already had 1, I was having number 2 and 3. So the twins were coming along, and I was like, "You know what? This isn't gonna work. I can't flip hamburgers and have 3 kids. It's just not gonna work." So then I had the practical mind. I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna do nursing." And that's what I did. I had the twins, changed majors, and started nursing school the same year they were born. So that's what I followed through with. I finished the bachelor's in nursing, and there I go. I start on my nursing career. And after I had done nursing school and had been working, my husband got accepted into med school. So we move on to med school, and I work, and I'm trying to juggle the morning day out and the preschool and my husband's schedule and my work. And I did ER nursing for the most part. So my schedule was in the hospital, of course, and my schedule was usually 12 hours, if not more, depending on my season. So that's what we did. We just juggled in between, me and him, and anything I could piece together for childcare. And that's how we lived, as far as our family is concerned, until going toward the end of med school. My husband originally thought he was going to do ER, because we both worked in the ER before, even together. And he thought he was going to do ER, which was like a 3-year residency after med school. So we were thinking, okay, this is going to be great. We're just going to do med school. We're going to fly through the our residency, and then life's going to be peachy. We're just going to live life to the fullest. But he comes home one day, and I remember him, in a way, saying, you know what, I really don't want to do emergency medicine. I really want to do surgery. And it was like he basically was kind of asking me for permission, because he knew what it was like. I knew what it was like working around these people, what it would take. And by people, I mean the surgeons and their families. And there was no way I was going to say no. Like, if that's what he felt like he was needed to do, then that's what we were going to do. And we were going to figure it out. And that's what we did. So, towards the end of med school, there's all the interviewing for residencies. And he interviews for residencies, And I was thinking, you know what? We're just gonna, instead of the ER, gonna live life sooner. We're gonna live life, the surgery residency is a 5-year process. And I'm like, okay, so we'll just get through 5 years. It's just 2 more years. It's just 2 more years. Like our life was on hold. And to an extent, it might have been in some ways, but not really. So I was like, okay, we're gonna do this 5-year surgery residency, and then we're gonna live. Oh, I missed a step. So our first year in med school, we had number 4. I forgot to add that in. Sorry about that. So we had 4 kids, and we were juggling through the rest of med school with 4 and piecing together morning, day out, preschool, anything we could fit together, scheduling my schedule around his med school schedule. I worked a lot. Mostly I worked weekends. And I also had a babysitter, like a teenage babysitter, come in and watch the kids while I would go to work. And I would take them to and from home, which was about 45 minutes. So I was, work was 12 hours. And then I'd have hours on both sides of that to and fro, taking the babysitter to and back home. And so when my husband was doing his residency interviews, I was thinking, you know what? We're just going to live it up now. We're going to go to California. I've saved up my PTO. So I'm going to cash that sucker in and I'm going to have a mommy makeover. And we are going to move to California and this is going to be awesome. We're going to live on the beach and we're not going to look back. Like we're going to make this go and it's going to be awesome. Well, turned out that I ended up getting pregnant again, and it wasn't 1, it wasn't 2, it was 3. And so here I am going into the last year of med school for my husband. We have 4 kids already jumping around, living life, loving things, and here I was pregnant with 3. How in the world? Like, we were struggling as it was just to keep the lights on, you know? I mean, there were times it was like, pick a number, which bill is gonna get paid, because we were paycheck to paycheck through med school. And there I was pregnant with 3, and my husband was going through surgery residency interviews. So we have the triplets right before he graduated med school. And we took the safe route and we didn't pick the residency that was going to be too far. And even though we were by ourselves, like this whole time, it's not like people were living with us or that we had a nanny. We didn't have any of it. It was us and we were figuring it out. And so there we go, moving about 2.5 hours away for his surgery residency. And with that, he had to start early. I think it was in like end of May, somewhere in there. He had to start a little bit early and he started on the VA. So here I was with 7 kids, 3 of them being newborns. And we had all 7 of these within 7 years. Our oldest one was 7 when the triplets were born. So I had 7 in 7 years. I took 7 years to get my bachelor's degree in nursing. And we're moving to a new place about 2.5 hours away. Now, I had to basically do the move solo because he had already started working in residency. So I had to time it, moving 2.5 hours, timing with babies needing to eat and, kids needing to go to the bathroom and who's going to eat and when and where. So I had to coordinate all that and that worked out as it was supposed to. Just took a little bit of planning. But as we moved to the new place, I kept working. And instead of full time or part time, I did PRN, which was as needed. And so I would try to do as many shifts as I could. And most of the time they were night. So I would piece again, a babysitter, public school. The kids were in public school, the older ones. And so I would piece together the babysitter and the school and anything else I could fit together with my husband's schedule, and we would just make it work. Well, making it work really wasn't working. I would just not sleep because babysitter would go to school, college school, and so when I would work at night, I'd come home, she would have a little bit of time in the morning, and then I'd have to wake up, and then she'd come back, and then I could go back to sleep. So it wasn't working. And sometimes I look back on 'em and think, what was I thinking? And what was I thinking was I needed to work. I was thinking I had to work. I was thinking I needed to not waste my education. Like, who am I to not do this job? Because I went to college for it. I spent all this time on it. I spent this money on it. Who am I not to work it? I mean, that's what we do. That's what we do as women. We have to juggle, and work is part of the juggle. Except I was getting sick. Like, I was not sleeping. I was not eating. I wasn't even able to speak because I would lose my voice. And so, which is probably a blessing in disguise if you count, getting on to kids and stuff. But there were two things that happened that were kind of pivotal for me during that work time. And that was we will go through extremes to do what we're told or what we think we're expected to do. And we will make all the excuses in the world not to do what we think and what we know we should do. And what I ended up doing was on the days I absolutely could not stay awake, I would take all 7 kids, 7 and under. We had 5 girls, 2 boys, and I'd put them in the girls' bedroom, and I would make sure the window was locked. There was 1 window, the closet had all the toys, the room had all the toys, and I would lay on the floor in front of the door, and I would just fall in and out of sleep in order for me just not to have to stay completely awake. So that's what I ended up doing several times in order just to get little cat naps in and to make sure that they were not able to escape. And this was like the original escape room. If you wanted out of that room to go to the bathroom, you were going to have to make me get up. And I just wanted to make sure that they were okay and that if anything was going on, I would hear it. Like, it was a half sleep. And so whoever was getting on each other's nerves, partially conscious and awake. So that was one thing I ended up doing was laying on the floor in front of the door, just trying to get some cat naps in, all because I needed to work. And I didn't take that as a wake up call. I just took that as a necessary evil for doing what I thought I was supposed to do. One other thing that was somewhat pivotal that kind of became a last straw was one day, this was not a lay in front of the door day. This was I'm going to sit on the couch and I'm going to just watch the kids in the living room. So I sat on the couch and then I woke up to our pet rabbit jumping over the couch and our little basset hound jumping over the couch after the rabbit. And I was only sitting down. I was not laying down. I sat down and I just fell asleep and I woke up to that. And I remember thinking, this has got to stop. Like, immediately, any mom would know that sheer fear of, oh my God, what did I just do? Like, and then you go on search for making sure everybody's accounted for, make sure everybody's safe. Where is everybody? And then it's like trying to figure things out and make sure that nothing bad's going on. So I remember thinking, something's got to give. Like, someone at home's gonna get hurt because I can't stay awake, or someone at work is gonna get hurt because I can't sleep. And I've always been one that needs sleep, and I'm definitely not one that can go without it. Not very long. So I decided, you know what? Something's got to give because I just don't want anyone to get hurt. And on both sides, home or work. So one thing that happened was Saturday, neither one of us were working, and we take all the kids and we just start driving around. We like little road trips and little side trips to just go see what's going on wherever we happen to be. And so followed these signs for a yard sale. And we go to this yard sale, and it's like these little townhouses. They're all connected together. And one of our twins, she finds this book, Little House on the Prairie. And I'm like, okay, we'll get it was only a quarter. And then it was like flashbacks for growing up. And I used to idealize that TV show. And in a way, maybe I personified Ma and Pa Ingalls with being my mom and dad. I Interestingly, they both actually favored my mom and dad, and so that was always something maybe I idealized as, like, my family on the screen. And so when we got the book, she was through it in no time. They were very good readers, and I think it may have kick started, "Why don't we try this?" Just a little bit, because money was not tight. Money was, like, almost suffocating with how little that we had, and that's why I thought I needed to work. But instead of working all the time, I wasn't working all the time anymore. I was just doing PRN, so as needed. But I was trying to help the budget. That's what I thought I was doing. I thought I was helping, and I was with money, but I wasn't there. I wasn't helping with the family. I was helping with dollars. So one thing I took from my worlds colliding was, why don't I try to make things from scratch? And maybe that would save money. And, you always hear a penny saved is a penny earned. Well, let me see how many pennies I can save. So, some of the first things I started to do were making bread. So, I made our own bread, and it was a braided bread. I don't know why I started with a braided bread. I wasn't gonna do the artisan bread in one lump. I was gonna do the harder one. So I did the braided bread. I did it, and I learned how. And another thing I did, I think the first thing I canned was tomato sauce. And we had gone to the farmer's market and gotten tomatoes from a local farmer, brought it home. I think it was a whole case, maybe 2 cases of tomatoes. Never canned a thing in my life, and was just I don't even know how I figured it out, because we didn't have, like, scroll on your phone internet. I think I had to go online on our computer and print it off and go one page at a time and step by step, but I did the tomato sauce. So that's how I started down my homestead route, and it was just the beginning. So I thought I needed to work. And really what I wanted, this is where we'll go through extremes versus excuses. Really what I wanted it was the little house on the prairie life. I really wanted to be Ma. I really wanted, my kids to be those kids. That's what I wanted, but I didn't have that. And it looked different, it looked hard because I didn't know how. So I did wean myself off working, and I went home for good. And I wanted the old fashioned life where my family lived together. We lived off the land. My marriage was healthy. My kids knew their dad, which was a huge one for me because, like I said, he was in surgery. residency, and that meant he was gone a lot. His work was not the same as other medical doctors' work. So I wanted my kids to know their dad. I also wanted them to know each other. So I didn't want them not to know each other just as even people. I didn't want someone else raising my kids through daycare or public school. I wanted my kids to learn our values and what was right and wrong. What I wanted to teach them was right and wrong. I wanted to be a traditional homemaker. I wanted it. I wanted it so bad. I wanted to continue to make my own bread. I wanted to preserve my own food. I wanted to grow a garden. I wanted to have chickens. I wanted the dream. That's what I wanted. But I'm not gonna lie, I struggled, like, a lot. I didn't struggle with the dream, I had the dream down. Like, I can dream till the cows come home. I struggled with isolation. I struggled with thinking what I was doing had no value being at home. I struggled thinking I was the worst mom because it was hard. I struggled thinking what I did at home was never as good as what my husband did as a surgeon. I struggled wondering if I was failing my kids, not doing what the rest of society was doing with their kids. The video games, the phones, the sports, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, all of it. We didn't have it. I struggled thinking I had to do everything in my dream life or I failed. Like I had to do it all. Like if I didn't do it all, yeah, in my head, I was a complete failure. So I struggled with feeling alone and not fitting in with other doctors' wives. I mean, imagine that. Even though we were in residency and not, an attending or any of that at the moment, at that point in time, you still have somewhat of a reputation to kind of uphold as a doctor's wife. And I didn't fit it. I didn't fit it at all. I struggled thinking I failed my kids' education by pulling them out of public school and homeschooling. I struggled living different than the rest of society. I struggled, honestly, with all of it. I struggled all the way through my kids growing up. Like all the way through. I kept all of that in my head, in my mind, thinking about it. And then I realized something. Now the kids are all grown. So what I realized was I didn't fail society. Society failed me. I was trained to get a job. I wasn't trained to run a home. So through all my struggles, it was how I became stronger. And my staying home raising my family, when society says I wasn't contributing to society, I realized when my kids were grown that I wasn't contributing to society. I created society. My kids took what their upbringing was and went into society with those values, with those memories, with that family right alongside them. So, one reason I want to start this podcast is because we were called to be homemakers. We were created to be homemakers. We were called to embrace it as the profession that we were meant to have. We were not meant to think of it and see it and view it as a punishment. It's a profession. So I hope this podcast is somewhat of a battle cry to take back our roles, to take back our homes, to take back our families, to take back our society, one homemaker at a time. And with that, I just want to welcome you into hearing anything that I can help you with wherever you're stuck, wherever you're struggling. I've been there too. And you don't have to be alone. You don't have to be by yourself in this. See, this with it as a profession, we're also coworkers. Like we work alongside each other. We have our own profession and we work next to each other. So we're really along the same line. We're still working. We're working at home. And with that, I hope it becomes something that might be of value for anyone that might hear it and need it. Because I think I could have really used a lot of time to know that what I was thinking and what I was feeling is normal. It's normal to want to be at home. It's normal to struggle. It's normal to want the dream. It's normal to want your family as your priority. And that's another thing that I can say for stay at home moms, especially, is we in general as a society will say that our family is priority. But how many of us walk the walk and talk the talk? It takes a lot. And I'm not talking about the folks that absolutely cannot stay at home all the time. That's not where I'm going. If you want to be at home and you are called to be at home, which we all are, and raise your family and take back your home, then that's where the walk starts. That's where the talk and the walk converge. And that's where I hope to be able to be helpful for anyone that needs it and tell you all my successes, my failures, what's normal, what needs to go. And again, I would love to be your accountability partner. I would love to be a guide. I would love to be an encourager for what you're doing because what you're doing, again, is not contributing to society only. You're creating it. So, with that, I will see you next time. Bye.